Monday, the 10th of July. I'm heading back to the depot at High Wycombe, having collected some items. I won't get there in time for it to be open, so my plan is to tramp outside the depot, get this stuff offloaded in the morning, and then I get some CX work tomorrow and see how we get on. So today's been a short day. I'll tell you about it, but more importantly, let me tell you the second part of my values from Friday. So today I was taking my daughter's things from home to her new university address. I did that, had some lunch with her, and then I left her about 4:20 in Manchester. I made my way from there across to Liverpool and did my first pickup in Liverpool and finished at 5:45. I then made my way there to Crewe, my second pickup, and I finished there at 7:10. And then I made my way directly to High Wycombe, which is what I'm doing right now. And I will be back at the depot around about 10 o'clock. So that's all I've done today in terms of work. So I'll tell you my stats for today, which won't look that good to be fair. So today, when I finish, I will have worked for 5 hours and 3/4. I will have driven 239 miles, 239, and I'm averaging a pence per mile of 14.8 pence per mile for fuel. I haven't yet filled up, so that's just a bit of an estimate. At that price, I will have spent £35 and 37 pence on fuel today. My gross earnings today will be zero. Therefore, my net earnings after fuel will be minus £35 today. And I will add to my stats, because I do keep this, my hourly rate each day. And my hourly rate today was minus £2.67 an hour. Clearly not the usual day, because I've not ended up finishing any jobs today. But just so you know, this job is worth £260, 260. So tomorrow morning, when I drop off this load, that'll go on tomorrow's earnings. And that's the end of my work. Once I've got to the depot, I'll tramp in my van, and then tomorrow I'll be looking for work on the CX going to either Chelmsford, because I've got a route that starts in Chelmsford, or I'll get one going to Rotherham or Cirencester. And if I don't get a route from High Wycombe going to those places, I'll just take a route anywhere that's giving me decent money and try and end up in one of those 3 locations tomorrow night. Okay, next point. I've currently got 77 subscribers, so thank you very much for the 10 or 11 people that have subscribed over the weekend. I really appreciate you joining us. It's creeping up every day. Really appreciate it, thank you. I now want to finish off part 2 of my values, and if you aren't sure what they are, I did write them in the description of the last video. So I got as far as describing some examples of the first 2 values. My third value is this: it's to demonstrate a growth and optimistic mindset. And that's quite hard for me to explain what that means, but I know what it means in my head. And what I'll do is I'll explain it this way. What I've found that if I am positive, I find life so much easier. Conversely, if I go around looking at the negative, being down, blaming other things, other people, I find life is difficult. So just by changing actively how I view things that happen around me, from being negative to being positive, it changes my life. I also think that having a positive mindset is noticed by other people, and it's a great thing for customer service. And this is a business where you are dealing with customers, and the better you have relations with those people, the better your business will be. I find that people notice when I'm positive or when I'm negative, and I find that they respond nicer to me when I'm positive to them, and I find that they respond negatively towards me if I'm negative towards them. And even if they start off being negative, by me being positive towards them back in return, or not reacting to them negatively at least, it usually mitigates any downside to them, that interaction for me. So, not necessarily a great explanation, but that's how I see it. My life is so much easier now that I have that growth mindset. And my fourth value is a bit of a strange one. It's absolutely true reflection of who I am, and I'll use some examples to demonstrate it. So the actual value I have is worded like this: supporting and engaging in relationships with an equality of power dynamic. It's a bit wordy, it's a bit hard to understand, but I know what that means. And that means that I don't find it comfortable having interactions with people where the power dynamic is unbalanced. So when I was employed, having an employer that had authority over me just because of their job title, that didn't mean anything to me. If they were good at their job and they were professional and they were polite, and if they understood me and they allowed me to progress and learn, that's what I responded well to, that's what I liked. But just because you've got a job title and you gain some sort of authority because of that, or you get paid a bit more money, that I don't respond well to that. I don't feel it a comfortable dynamic. And I think another example I'll give is I'm a parent to children that are kind of becoming adults now, and I find that now they're older, I find it a lot more comfortable talking to them and engaging with them, because I can engage with them like they're adults, that they're free thinking individuals with their own opinions, their own values, their own perspectives on the world. And I want to know what they are, I want to find out what they are. I don't want to impose my values on them. And I'll always be their dad, I'll always be their parent, they'll always be my child. But in terms of my relationship with them, I'm more comfortable now they're adults, or becoming adults. When they were younger children, the dynamic was not balanced. I had to have authority, I had to tell them what to do, I had to guide them, I had to chastise them or teach them. They didn't always want to listen to me, and I wasn't always very good at it. And so that imbalance of power, parent over child, I'd never found I was comfortable with that. Whereas now that my children are growing up, I find the power dynamic isn't there so much, it's more equal, and I can ask them to teach me stuff, and it kind of helps to level out the playing field a bit. And my last example of this, which I would highlight, is I regard that bullying behaviour is this. I think bullies rely on having an imbalance of power. Whether that's actual power or perceived power is kind of neither here nor there. But bullying behaviour comes out because of that imbalance, and I hate bullies and bullying behaviour. It really upsets me. And so that's an example of where the imbalance of power is the cause of me finding those relationships uncomfortable. Right, so I'm going to move on. So so Friday today, I've talked about my 4 values, and they're ways in which I can base my decisions on to try and be a better person than I have been in the past. And I don't always get it right. And I've given examples where I've made mistakes even in these even recently. But what I do is I use this as a structure to judge, is my action within my values? If it is, brilliant, do that. And if it's not, I should check myself, stop doing that thing and correct it. Either apologise or make up for it, or stop doing it. So it helps me try, that being the opposite word, to be the kind of person I want to be. Now, off the back of those values, I had a list of things that I had to do to try and implement them. And from that list, which I'm not going to go into now, it's not that relevant, I realised that I was really bad at understanding how to communicate with people. So I did a bit of work where I analysed how should I communicate with people. And I came up with 5 sentences, 5 rules really, that I have in the forefront of my mind all the time. And I'm going to run through those 5 rules. They're really 4, and one split into 2 halves, A and B. So I'm going to read them out, and then I'm going to talk through what they mean and a couple of examples. So the first thing that I have written down is that I should listen carefully to other people. And for me that means if someone's talking to me, my first responsibility is just to listen, actively listen. Try to understand what they're trying to say. I find it difficult at the best of times to understand what people mean because of my narcissistic traits. And so this rule reminds me that I've got to focus on what they're saying, how they're saying it, and sort of make sure I clarify if I've got any questions what they mean. So active listening. So I don't sort of wait to jump in with my own point of view. Let them finish their point of view. Engage with that before I then bring in anything I want to say. And I found that really helpful and a really good reminder. It's the first thing I do. If I find that a conversation is going wrong, or I'm confused, or uncomfortable, I just say to myself, have you listened to them? And usually the answer to that is no, you haven't. And so I know how to correct that feeling that it's going wrong, or at least try to correct it. It's by listening to what they're really saying. My second, it's based on what I think is a fact, and the fact is mind reading is not a thing. So off the back of that, there are 2 things I remind myself to do. Firstly, don't assume that I know what someone is thinking, because I don't know what they're thinking. I have been proved in my life completely incompetent at understanding what people are thinking. I've given up trying to guess, so I don't guess. The answer is I ask them. What do you mean by that? What are you thinking? I don't assume I know. I don't ever try and do that because I know often wrong. And equally, if I can't read their mind, then they can't read my mind. So my second part to that is don't assume that someone knows what I'm thinking. I've got to tell them. I've got to remember to explain myself clearly. Use the right context. Make sure I've explained clearly what it is I'm trying to say. And at this point I want to come to an example where I didn't do that recently. And so I'm going to pause reading out the rest of them and just give you an example. And this is an example of something I believe about social media. Social media is great for some things, but it's really bad in my opinion for explaining complex ideas or ideas where there's grey areas. Because people are typing out a comment and they often think everyone's on the same page as them. So recently I put a comment on someone else's YouTube and what I was trying to say was in this particular example, you don't appear to have done this. What? Yeah, can you reflect upon that? Blah blah blah. But I didn't say the words "in this example." In my head, that was what I was asking. But when the person read the comments, they read it as being, in general terms, you don't do this. Can you explain? Blah blah blah. And so their response, although it was very respectful and detailed, wasn't responding to the question I was making, and therefore was misinterpreted. My question was misinterpreted. Now, because of my analysis that my reading is not a thing, I realised the mistake I'd made, and I then tried to correct it by amending the wording, talking to them in a different way. And so I feel that I do still make those mistakes, particularly on social media when you try to rush a comment out. But I am mindful that I have to. People don't know what I'm thinking. I have to explain myself really clearly. Before I started my YouTube channel, I had established all my values and my 5 rules for communicating. And if I hadn't done that, I would not have started my channel, because I use these all the time with my channel, because I don't want to miscommunicate. It's really easy to do so. The next of my rules is I am not going to be judgmental. I will only offer an opinion if I'm specifically asked to give an opinion. So what I've learnt is, I find that quite annoying. If I'm giving someone just a rundown of something and they give me their opinion without me asking it, I find that really annoying. And therefore when I do it, it's obviously annoying to other people. So therefore I try not to do that. When people are telling me stuff, my mind will automatically go into problem solving mode. I will try to solve the problem they're saying for them. And so number 4 I've learnt is, don't offer unsolicited advice. If you've got something you're saying to me and my mind comes up with an answer, I'm not going to give you the answer. I've learnt to keep it to myself. If you ask me for advice, you'll give me permission to give you what I truly think is the right advice for you. And because of my value about being honest and open, I will tell you literally what I think is the right thing that I think is for you, that you want to hear. Not want to hear, that you should hear. And sometimes it's not somebody wants to hear it, they want to hear something else. So I will not offer any advice unless you specifically say you want it. I've just learned it doesn't help anyone for me to do that. So I think, going back to one thing there which I want to expand upon, just one last thing, it's about expressing myself clearly. I've learnt, and people that know me really well have learnt, that when I've got something that I want to get out of my head, the best way in which I can do that, if it's complex, is just to ramble on, saying lots of words that come into my head out loud until something comes out of it that makes sense, that a thread comes out that makes sense. And when I do that, I realise what I'm trying to say. And that's not necessarily something that someone who is new to me or who doesn't know me would understand and would get and would allow even. And therefore it's not something you can do in social situations like small talk. I can't do small talk, because if you ask me opinion, I'll tell you honestly my opinion. You know, that's why I find people quite hard to deal with. So what I've found is, because my head can be quite full of stuff, if I'm trying to express something more clearly, the way that I can do it is by talking until it becomes clear. And I've learned that if I've got something going on in my head and I'm trying to sort it out, even on my own it works. So when I'm on my own, I will say out loud what I'm thinking, and by me hearing it coming back into my head from the outside, the words that I'm saying, eventually I get some sort of understanding coming back about what the thoughts are really saying, and I find that really useful, and it really gives me clarity other than just thinking in my head and not saying it out loud. So in terms of my communication, people who know me really well, and there's not many people who know this, would allow me just to go on and on because they know that helps me express myself. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. I think that's enough for today. I did try a microphone, a cheap microphone, and I wasn't happy with the results. So this video is done without a microphone. I've just tried to talk a bit louder and a bit more clearly than usual. I think the microphone might work better when I'm not driving, so we'll see. Before I finish, there's a lot that I've said in the last two videos that you might agree with or disagree with or have some views upon. I'm really happy to engage with you either way. What I'm saying is, those are my 4 values, those are my 5 rules for communicating. They work for me. I'm not saying they're right for you. Thank you very much for listening to this ramble. What have you learned today?